Hello, Dale Little here with Rescue American Ministries in Chisinau, Romania. And we're looking at Daniel chapter 6. And you're going to have to pardon me, I've got a cough drop in my mouth. I've still got a persistent cough that I've had for a little while now. I know some people probably just cut the video off just automatically. But, you know, it's the only way I'm going to get through it. And I want to get these on out there while I can. We've so far I've posted most of these videos on YouTube, and then linked them to my Facebook. For those of you that see most of them there, I'll probably start posting them individually to each one. I've been kind of learning up a little bit. Some people that know more than I do. The easiest way that I've found really to get videos, and especially there for a while, it's a little bit different now. Things have changed a little bit, but it was much easier for me, partly because of slow internet connection that I had at one point. Easier to post to YouTube and then just put that link to Facebook. Now got a little faster linkage, and I'm seeing that people are saying that you do better to post to Facebook without using a link from YouTube, because Facebook will deliberately not, as many of your friends won't see the YouTube videos. Facebook will kind of repress them because they don't want to redirect people away from Facebook, and so therefore they're looking for videos that are posted directly to Facebook. And so yeah, that's something I'll take a look at, and I may just start posting to both individually, so that you know they won't be missed for the people that might be interested in them. But we're starting in, like I said, Daniel chapter 6, and we'll see here again, and this. We're back in. We've looked at some other things. We've looked at a little bit of prophecy. Like I say, there's a lot of history in the book of Daniel also. There's prophecy, but there are the good practical applications, and we're back in one of those here in chapter 6 with King Darius. And, of course, this is the account of where Daniel was put in the lion's den. And again, it's the commitment that someone makes to follow God, to follow Christ in today's day. So let's get started. It says, it pleased Darius, and this is the one that came in. And as I mentioned in the previous chapter, no one knows for sure who this Darius is. But the more I studied, the more I'm inclined to believe that's probably was Cyrus's general, and he, divided the kingdom up. And this Darius may not have been the king of the whole Medo-Persian Empire. He may have been set up as the king, and he's the one that actually captured the city, if that's who we think it is. Some people say it may have been a throne name that Cyrus took when he captured, the Babylon and over the whole empire. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. There's not been anything discovered on this Darius here, but there's historical evidence for, of course, Cyrus and his general that is said to have actually captured the city of Babylon. It's said that by some that Cyrus himself came several days later, maybe a couple of weeks or so, into the city. But at any rate, this Darius, just because, we've talked about that also, just because that there's no historical mention of this Darius doesn't mean that he didn't exist, that maybe there was an actual Darius, just separate from these two maybe. But We don't know for sure. Too many times secular and the skeptics and the critics jump on these facts that, well, nothing has been found. Well, that's fact that nothing has been found. It's not a fact that they're not really historical people, places, or happenings, because the archaeological evidence and the historical evidence just hasn't been discovered yet. And constantly, new archaeological discoveries are being made. You don't hear a lot about that. You find things that people find and they jump on to try to discount the biblical narrative and say, well, it's all wrong or something like that. But they ignore these, the real evidence that shows that, the Bible was right all along. And so it is, we saw that Belshazzar was one of those that they said never existed. And there wasn't any historical evidence it existed. Well, then in, I think it's 1854, then they discovered that some cuneiform writings that did verify that Belshazzar was king of Babylon. And so this Darius, we'll not spend any more time on him, but it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give an account, so that the king might suffer no loss. And so these were just government officials that would be under the king, and Daniel would be one of the 3 that would be over the kingdom. And that would, it says, then in verse 3, let me back up. They would give an account to the king so that the king would suffer no loss. Look, just like a president today, look at all the cabinet members he's got. And any world leader, all the people to assist him that's necessary to run the government. It's a huge bureaucracy that is in place. Even just the White House staff and the cabinet is numerous. I don't know what the number is, but these 3 were going to be over everything else, so they have to have the people in place to be able to keep things in order, and they're to look after the king's interest. And that's the way it is today. We're not seeing that a lot. We've got people in government today that's looking after their own interest or their political party's interest, and they're supposed to be serving at the behest of the president, and they're there to make a name for themselves. And sometimes it seems that they're instead of being ambassadors to the country that they are sent to represent the United States, they're more inclined to look after the interest of that country they go to than they are the one that sent them. That's just backwards from what it's supposed to be. So then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. It doesn't say, even though Daniel was very knowledgeable, it doesn't say that he had more knowledge than everybody else today. That's not the reason is necessarily. A person has to have that to succeed in a position or a job. But Daniel primarily is because of the excellent spirit that was in him. You can have someone that's a genius, but may be absolutely useless in a certain position because they don't have the right spirit, and they don't have the right motives in serving. And so we see that the king had planned to set Daniel over, these be the head of these 3. And then the high officials and the satraps. Here we go. Boy, this is no different than today. Here it is, Christmas, the day after Christmas, 2019, soon to be 2020. And so things are not much different in the United States right now. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these three men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Maybe a little bit of difference there, but still, you put righteous men up for as a judge or any other political office, an appointee of some kind, or even as an elected official, and immediately the enemy begins to try to undermine them, and if possible to cut them off ahead of time by slandering and lying and all kinds of false charges. And it doesn't matter if they're true or not. Just get them out there, and it doesn't matter if they're true. They can be proven false. Well, sometimes it's time the news media reports on it, and truth comes out, then it's too late. Damage has been done, election's been held, and even sometimes if it's found out before, people's already got that in their mind that this person is guilty of these things because of all the people that they had lined up to make the false charges. Same thing happened with Jesus and Judas. They paid him 30 pieces of silver, and they saw. They were looking for someone, and here comes Judas along very conveniently. Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." And they're going to build him up, of course, and of course that was a common thing there to say. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whosoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Well, first of all, they started out with an outright lie again. And like I say, these people that want to undermine a good man, and you find somebody that stands head and shoulders above everybody else, they can't compete with them. So what to do is they have to bring them down so that they can be on level with them, because they can't bring themselves up to that level. You see that all the time, not just in government. You see it in employment. You see it in places, at the workplace. And I've experienced it. Many of you probably have experienced it. I worked in the prison system for a number of years, and I've said before a time or two that was I guess my, in a sense, time by the brook Cherith, but it went much longer than 3 years as Elijah went through. And I'm no Elijah, but yet the comparison is there for all of us, I think, that serve God, that we go through those times. I had I was very professional in my job. I tried to do my job. I stayed at my post, whereas a lot of other officers didn't. And so we had this new officer that came and constantly trying to undermine me. He saw right away that the sergeant, he figured, kind of favored me. And well, if he did, it's because I did my job. And so he began to try to undercut me. And even on the radio traffic, once in a while, the sergeant called out, and asked the question, "Well, Officer Little did, this." And I just walked in the sergeant's office and I said, "I hope you understand," and I think he did, that some people don't have what it takes to rise to the level of professionalism that they need, so they have to try to cut somebody down that's above them. And so that's what we see. And that's what these men are doing. And so we see that they say that all the high officials, well, Daniel wasn't one of those. And Daniel was, right there, one of the top three, as we say. Of course, they all showed up and said, well, we're all in agreement. All the high officials have said that. And as I said before, people unscrupulous, they have no problem with lying. I want to remind you, if lying is a way of life for you, you better do some checking up. The Bible says that all liars be turned into hell. That don't mean everybody that's ever told a lie. Well, it is if you haven't been saved. There is forgiveness in Jesus Christ. But if there's a habitual pattern of lying, and that's just a way of life and it doesn't bother you, and anytime you get caught at something you lie your way out of it or try to, then that's a sign that maybe you haven't been born again, that you do need to do business with God. Because that should not be. It should not be a habitual pattern for you. Once in a while, somebody slip up. We're all guilty of slipping up here and there for whether it's lying or something else. But if it's a way of life and it's a pattern for you, then that's a real problem. And so the king, of course, that's a great idea. And so he went along with it, signed the law into law. And so it says when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber, open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Now, this year we're getting into this practical application that I keep talking about. Here's the place where Daniel didn't just deliberately go out and say, well, I'm just going to defy what these people said. No, he did what he always did. That this was a pattern for him. This is what he did. And Daniel said, I'm not going to stop just because these men are out to get me. Now, he may not have known that they were out there waiting to entrap him, but at any rate, it goes back just like his 3 friends a few chapters before, when Nebuchadnezzar had set up the image, commanded that everybody fall down and worship that image, and they were thrown into the fiery furnace. And, the thing then was, if God delivers, he's able to. But if he doesn't, so be it. We're going to serve God. And so Daniel basically is making the same case here. He's going to do what he's always done. He didn't do this to go out and make a big show. I'm going to show them. I'll do as I please. No, he did what he'd been doing all along. And so, so should we. We don't need to go out and make necessarily a statement. I mean, I'm not saying there's not time maybe to do that sometimes. But he just went ahead with what was the way of life for him and what he did, his way of worship and service. And, of course, I'm here in Romania where we just, like I said, day after Christmas, it was in, I think, 1989 that the dictator Ceausescu was executed after a reign of many years. And he imprisoned and beat and tortured and had many Christians that he persecuted, had persecuted. Communism, I'll just put it out there, socialism and communism have no place for Christianity. You might as well get that out of your mind. You got these people caught up in this social justice stuff that think that socialism and communism is the way. No, it's Antichrist. They'll have some good things that sound good. I even hear today, about how good things were sometimes under Ceausescu. And there's no doubt that there were certain ways. But he's had many of the Christian faith that he was not going to allow to speak. And they were persecuted. They were tortured. and they were murdered. And so he was a tyrant. But tyrants have to do some things that the people like, or he's not going to be there long. And so he tried to appease the people in certain ways, and I've heard that he had good, government services in place, but people were basically enslaved under him. He was in the process. He built a lot of buildings in the cities, and but his plan was that he was going to move a lot of people, and they say he harassed a lot of the villages. He's going to move people into the cities to where he could easier control them and have them available for manufacturing jobs. And of course, he's the one that was getting rich off of it. So, there's just nothing there. These people, what I'm getting at, these people, not only in Romania, but through the whole Soviet system, behind the Iron Curtain, we used to call it, then people today are not taught anymore in the schools about the millions that were killed and persecuted for their faith. But the men stood and said, well, I'm not going to, deny my God. They took the persecution. You had others that just kind of went along with the authorities. And it's difficult. It's a difficult decision to make. But many did. And so Daniel here did. His three friends did. From the time they were captured and taken captive, and throughout their service, they stood. And God looked after these. Now, Stephen was stoned to death. Most of the apostles, except for John, I think, died a martyr's death. And John, they say, was boiled in oil and didn't die and didn't kill him. God spared him. So there comes a time. What are we going to do? Where are you at when you're faced with these types of situations? When it comes down to it, either deny God or suffer the consequences. What are you going to do? We need to go ahead and have our head set, our heart set, that we're going to serve our God. A man can do what they want to us, but we're going to serve and we're going to be faithful to God. Jesus Christ died the most awful death anyone could ever die on that cross. And what made it so much worse? Other people have been crucified. Other people have, been skinned alive. I hear that was one of the things the Assyrians did to terrorize people. If they made captives outside the city walls, they would take people, the people that had been captured, and skin them alive there where everybody could see it, and to put terror in their minds and try to convince them to go ahead and surrender. We face little things a lot of times. If you can't stand the little things, you're not going to stand when it really gets hard. And so I want to challenge you. We need to make up our mind. Stand for God. Stand for Christ. And it's not going to happen by accident. We need to go ahead and be walking in that direction. If you can't even make it to church, you can't be faithful to church, and you can't be faithful in other ways. You're not going to be faithful when it comes down to a situation like that. You're too caught up into the world. You're too caught up into the pleasures of this world, and you're just not willing. You don't trust God that He's going to take care of the situation one way or the other. Many had to give their lives. Many had just unspeakable things done to them and their families. And it's still going on today. You don't hear about it. But there's Christian genocide that's growing around the world right now. And it's going to get worse. At some point, the Bible says that as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the day of the coming of the Son of Man. That was the day when things were bad, about as bad as they've ever been. It was bad enough that God destroyed the earth with the flood. You need to make up your mind how you're going to stand. Dale Little, Rescue American Ministries, Cessna, Romania.